and this week's lecture, as I said, will focus on an overview of professional conduct. I will be lecturing from Chapter 4 of the recommended text by Jennifer Ostergren. So let's get started. So professional conduct is referred to the way that you carry yourself within a professional setting and during professional interactions. It will also be used to help guide your thoughts further as you prepare for your role as a professional SLPA. Now, I know that last week we talked about ASHA and how they don't necessarily govern your role as a SLPA. However, as you know, ASHA's role is still important to you as a SLPA. So ASHA has presented 5 tips to keep in mind when considering your professional conduct. So as you see here, those 5 are: maintain a positive and pleasant attitude, project a professional image, convey a willingness to learn new things, demonstrate initiative, and exhibit a sense of organization. Those 5 areas have been identified as positive traits necessary to be successful at your job. Now, I am a strong proponent for individuality and being true to yourself at all times. However, when you are in a professional setting, it is important that you are not a distraction at work and that your behavior facilitates positive movement within your relationship with your clients, employers, and our colleagues. So, some things I want you to think about as we discuss professional conduct. The categories of appearance, communication, self-assessment and self-improvement, and conflict resolution are what I want you to be mindful of when you are considering your role in your professionalism. So, as you see here, we're going to start off with appearance. And appropriate attire is a must. Your appearance is the first line of marketing yourself. In a split second, a client, caregiver, or potential employer will judge you and will make their first opinion of you. And that opinion can be favorable or not. And of course, the latter is much more difficult to get rid of. So when considering your appearance, you want to dress appropriate for your work setting and our clients. Your specific attire will be determined by your work site's dress code. Some sites may be very casual, allowing jeans and tennis shoes, while other areas are more conservative and may require specific attire. It is important for you to know those roles. But let's talk about the sites that are casual. Be mindful of what is casual. For sites that are casual, you want to think of the clothing that you choose to wear. Consider how the supervisor and the other staff members are dressed. Think about those low-cut shirts, the short skirts and dresses, the low-waist pants. Think about it if you're bending over or picking something up, or if you're reaching over to teach your client something. Will you have too much of your personal areas showing? If so, probably not appropriate for you to wear. Actually, I'm not going to say probably not appropriate. I'm going to say that's not appropriate for you to wear. If you are allowed to wear t-shirts, be mindful of the messages of those t-shirts. For example, anytime I wear a t-shirt to work on a casual day, it's always something that is representative of either Loma Linda University or my role as an instructor or my role as an SLP. Those are the only t-shirts I typically wear. If you're allowed to wear jeans, which are my favorite piece of clothing. You want to save your trendy jeans that are worn and faded and ripped up, the cool ones that everyone likes. You want to save those for the weekends. Okay, so at work, you just wear some plain jeans that will pretty much go with anything. Okay, you also want to be aware of your site's policy on things such as body arts, piercings, jewelry, perfumes, nail length, nail art. I know some of this may not be necessary for some people because it may not apply to them, or you may already know it, but I just want to bring this stuff up just for you to think about. Let's talk about tattoos. Tattoos are very trendy now, and I don't even know if they're trendy, they're just a part of this culture. And some sites may allow tattoos. And so if you are if you are someone and you have a tattoo, be sure that it's not offensive or it may not be perceived as an inappropriate tattoo. And if it is, then it may need to be covered. And in fact, if you have any tattoos in areas that will be exposed to clients, you may want to check with your supervisor because they may want you to close them up or cover them up, excuse me. You may need to purchase piercing retainers for some of your piercings. For example, a nose piercing. You may have to get a flesh tone piercing for that. You may also be asked to stop wearing specific perfumes or colognes. Why? That's your personal choice, right? Well, for some clients, those smells may cause irritations or they may cause sensory issues that may set off a client. And so if your perfume is too strong or the cologne is too strong and it's negatively impacting your client, then you may be asked to wear something different or to not wear any at all. And just something to be aware of because it could happen. And finally, nail length or nail art for ladies, most ladies. Um, some places you can't have nail polish beyond your fingertips. Okay, you can't have longer nails. So you just want to be aware of what those limitations or what those guidelines are for your site. Okay, so I'm going to move out of appearance. I think we've covered enough of that. I think you guys have got the idea of that. Let's talk about communication. Okay, so communication is so important, and even more so as healthcare professionals with goals to improve the disorders of communication. So we need to consider that, right? So when think about communication, you want to consider the differences between verbal and nonverbal communication. You want to consider written communication. You want to think about disability sensitive communication. Each one of these factors will affect you and how you interact at your job sites. Okay? So I have a cartoon for you. So I was all, I don't got no pencil, but you might could give me yours. And she's at the park, right? Versus, I told him I didn't have a pencil. Then I asked him if I could borrow his. Same message, right? Different setting, right? So, we are always judged by our verbal and nonverbal communication skills, especially as speech language pathologists and speech language pathologist assistants. I'm always getting the statement of, what did you say? Aren't you an SLP? Haha. Funny joke, right? Not so much. But anyhow, back to the statement or the lecture. So there's a UCLA professor emeritus of psychology. His name is Albert. I'm going to try and pronounce this, but I'm not quite sure. But Albert Morabian. He presented research that stated that 7% of messages received pertains to the words that are spoken. So only 7% of messages that are perceived or pertain to the words that are spoken. 38% of that message pertains to the way the words are said. And 55% of the message pertains to the way that facial expressions or body language is perceived, right? So let's think about that. Only 7% of what we say, or excuse me, only 7% of our communication is based upon the words that are coming out of our mouths. The remainder, 93%, all has to do with our tone of voice and our facial expression or body language. What does that tell us? Communication is very complex. During communication, you want to consider your audience when determining verbal and nonverbal communication. So just as we see here with the cartoon, we have someone speaking to a friend. She's using slang or non-mainstream English for sure, versus when she went into her classroom, much more proper mainstream English, right? So you would speak differently to a supervisor or colleague than you would to a parent or client. Perhaps different vocabulary is being used, okay? You would speak differently to an adult client versus a child client. A client with a cognitive impairment versus one without. Be mindful of the different factors when communicating with others and make the modifications as necessary. So basically, you want to be an effective code switcher. I'm sure most of you guys know what code switching is. But code switching is referred to as one's ability to switch his or her language, dialect, and or speaking style to fit a specific setting or situation. Your ability to code switch between your personal personality, perhaps maybe you're more laid back, or not, and your professional personality is vital for your success. Like I said, individuality is really important, but you can't be a distraction, or you don't want to be a distraction at work. Okay? So, when we're thinking of verbal and nonverbal communication, some things I want you to consider in the professional setting. Verbally, you want to think of how you address others within your professional site and make sure it is appropriate. Speak with appropriate clarity, rate, and volume to be most effective for others to understand. Consider your environment and consider who you are speaking with, and be prepared to code switch to meet that setting or to meet those individuals. Non-verbally, we want to be mindful of your body language and your facial expressions, as well as your tone of voice. Be an active listener when others are talking with you by demonstrating your interest and understanding of their concerns and messages, as opposed to being distracted and looking around. Sometimes, simply summarizing and restating what was said to you is helpful to demonstrate your attention to a client, caregiver, colleague, or supervisor. Even when giving feedback to your clients, think about the energy that you place into saying, good job, or try that again. Or let's say you're providing corrective feedback or modifying behaviors and you're wanting the child to sit down. Let's say um, the client is being a little bit non-compliant and you want them to sit down and attend to you, but they are trying to get out of their seat. Sit down, honey. Let's not do that. Probably really won't get them listening to you as opposed to a much more firm voice. Okay, it's time to sit down. Okay? So we want to think about that. You also want to be sensitive to cultural differences as well as generational differences. Okay? when you're if you're in a situation where you're assisting with translating, or perhaps you need someone to translate for you, make sure that you're speaking to that individual that is needing the translation. So if you're speaking to a client and the client doesn't speak English and you are the translator for the SLP, you want to be sure that when you are speaking for the client, that you are listening, giving that client eye contact, and that you are translating that client's words appropriately. Okay? And you just want to be sensitive, and I'm 100% sure and confident that I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but just some things to keep in mind. Okay? Now, let's talk about speaking styles during treatment. So, altering your communication style isn't only limited to the dialect or grammar that you speak with. As an SLPA, you will work with a variety of individuals of many ages. You will also need to remember to modify your speaking styles when you are providing treatment to a 3-year-old versus an 83-year-old, right? Versus speaking to the parents of your clients versus speaking to someone with deficiencies in cognitive abilities. So I have some short video clips to demonstrate different styles of speaking. Okay, so let's look at the language treatment with the toddler. Oh no. Let's see, okay. I'm having a slight problem. Let me see if the school age one will open. Let's see. Let me try this. There's something going on with my Internet Explorer. Perhaps I can try to get it through here. Sorry, guys. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Let me see. Okay. I'm going to try and pause the recording really quickly. And then
outside. Very bright, sunny day, about 77 degrees. Jet. Blue, jet. Blue. Spontaneous fluency when you're not doing anything, like yes, strategy. Yeah, it just comes out. You're not using a strategy. It's just spontaneous. Sometimes, like when I and what do you think is different about others? Is there anything that you can think of, or anything that's happening? Spontaneous fluency when you're not doing anything, like yes, strategy. When I feel tense. So do you think feeling worried makes more stuttering? Mm-hmm. Is there anything that makes you feel less worried?
Okay, let's see. I think I am back on, and so I am going to, get back to our original page. And let's go to where we were. Uh-oh. Yikes, there we are. So I'm going to fast forward through here. Okay, so where we left off, I wanted to show you guys a clip of a video from speech therapy with the toddler. So let me step away from this really quickly and pull it up. So let's look at this.
Brown train. Brown train. Brown. Okay. Brown train. No cheese. Listen to Sylvie. Brown train. Brown train. No. Ice cream. Train. Okay. Next one. Which one? A. What is A? What's that one? A jet. Airplane. Today is February the 26th.
Okay, I'm going to fast forward this piece.
Very bright. Jet.
Okay.
Blue jet. Blue jet.
So here's a situation where it looks like she's on language therapy and she appears to be working on 2-word utterances with him.
What's next? One. Yes. Elephant. 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 You did it. Red ladybug. Where's she, Tristan? Red ladybug. Did you find it? Where's the ladybug? Look. Where's the ladybug? Just find the ladybug. She's on a leaf. You tell me.
Okay. A couple of things you see here. So cute. So a couple of things you see here. You see the short phrases, the slow productions. She's not using a lot of complex language. She is giving him multiple models. So that's just an example of working with a toddler. Okay. The next one that I'm going to show you is this one. That is fluency treatment with a school age child. Okay, so we'll go back here and we'll press play. Now, so So, very cute guy, very much in tune with what's going on with his stuttering. As you see, the speech language pathologist didn't um, speak too juvenile to him. She spoke to him as she would anyone else because she knew that it was appropriate and he was able to handle it. So he was much more, her wording or the SLP was much more, presented much more complex structures and used mature language with him because it was appropriate for this kiddo. So just some examples of how you want to be sure to modify these things and even think about, if you're working with a teenager, you wouldn't provide the same level of feedback with the same type of energy that you would with like a 5-year old, of course. Okay, so things to think about. So let's move on. I apologize for the little glitch that we had, but hey, we got through it. So let's talk about the next type of communication is your written language skills. As an SLP, you will be required to document those treatment sessions as well as complete administrative tasks that have been assigned to you by your supervisor. So the following is a list of guidelines that will help you with your documentation skills, okay? So we want to think about your written language strategies, okay? So you are expected to be proficient in your written communication skills, writing neatly on documentation, utilizing appropriate writing conventions, which includes appropriate spelling and basic grammar. I do understand that in some cases, complete sentences may not be required, perhaps if you're taking like your daily data logs. However, one thing to consider is that the messages that you are documenting should always be very clear enough that the intended message is clear. So, anytime a supervisor or another professional that has access to review those files, that they are reading that information, they should not be confused by what you have written because you want to use those appropriate writing conventions. Okay? Keep your messages clear. Proofreading is probably the best thing that you need to do. Proofread your work to ensure that your writing is sufficient. I can't say that again. Proofread your work. I can't tell you how many SOAP notes I've reviewed as a clinical instructor and have found very simple mistakes that could have been fixed if they would have just been proofread or if the statements would have been proofread. Okay? You want to use formality in your writing. Stay away from slang or like your text language. If you're using acronyms and it's acronyms or abbreviations, be sure to write them out first and then go back to using them the second time that they are referenced in the notes. Okay? You want to be concise when you're reporting necessary details. Think of the relevance of what you are reporting. Okay? You don't need to tell the entire story from step one all the way to step 100. You want to basically state the meat and potatoes of what's going on. What is the most relevant details? Okay? Noting the weather outside is not very relevant to his communication treatments. So there's no point in noting that. Okay? I know it sounds silly, but you'd be surprised what happens. You want to make sure that your message is clear and don't assume that the reader knows what you are trying to say. You want to write as if the speaker has, excuse me, you want to write as if the reader has no background knowledge on what you are sharing in that note. So, for example, um, sometimes what I'll see when I'm reviewing documentation is that the student clinician is writing from a point of view that they are in the room, and so they're writing notes based upon what they saw. And as I'm reading it, I'm very confused because I don't have a point of reference because perhaps I wasn't observing at the time of that treatment session or at the time that they are describing that treatment. And so when that happens, I'm left to be confused. Now let's imagine that you are that SLPA and you've written your notes and your supervisor was in a different room at the time or perhaps at a different location once you are licensed. And so as your supervisor begins to review those SOAP notes and she needs to approve and perhaps check on your client on the client's progress, she's confused because the note is written from a place where you assume that she knew what was going on. So it's very important to make your messages clear. Okay? And also, you should be receiving feedback on your writing. And when you do not personalize the message. So if you receive feedback that you did something incorrect or your writing wasn't up to par for whatever reason, Don't personalize it. Take that as a moment to learn. Okay. Your supervisor is looking for specific information, and it's her job to communicate those needs to you. Think about the code of ethics and responsibility. It's her or his responsibility to ensure that you clearly understand what it is that you're doing, which will require corrective feedback at times. Okay? So the thing is to be sure that you learn from your mistakes and be mindful of those corrections on future documentation. Okay? So when we are thinking about written language strategies, it comes down to the six that are presented here. Use appropriate writing conventions, keep messages clear, use formality, proofread your work, be concise, and learn from your feedback without personalizing it. Okay? Now let's talk about electronic communication. There are times when you will be able to, or there are going to be many times where you will use electronic communication, which would include text messages or emails. Okay. When this occurs, please use professionalism, even if you are texting. Okay. Texting your supervisor a message such as, "Oh crap, my alarm didn't go off this morning. I'll be there at around 9:45ish. I'm so sorry." Yes, that is not an appropriate way to notify your supervisor that you are running late. And yes, this has actually happened. So, you want to know your site's policy on communicating about clients via electronic communication to maintain your compliance with privacy laws as well. So, for example, here at Loma Linda University, we are not allowed to text any information regarding our clients at all. We are able to perhaps use a first name only through Loma Linda University's email system. However, students are not allowed to communicate with professors regarding clients utilizing any general emails or any personal emails. So, for example, your Gmail account, they're only able to contact us regarding their clients via our Loma Linda site. Why? Because it's encrypted and because we know that it's secure and safe versus um, a Google, it's not secure and safe. So you want to remember to be appropriate in your electronic communication, keep it professional, and know the confidentiality rules for your site. Okay? Let's talk about disability sensitive communication. Okay? The clients that you will work with will have some sort of disability. In fact, if they do not, they should not be working with you unless you are working on something such as accent reduction or accent modification. Other than that, your client should have some type of identified disorder. Now, whether that disability is something as mild as a simple articulation disorder or something very severe as an individual with cerebral palsy, autism, and cognitive delays that present with physical impairments, along with extremely limited communication skills. No matter how your clients present, they deserve the same respect as an individual without disability. And I'm sure I don't have to say that. So you want to make sure that you are communicating with that individual appropriately. Okay? Some tips that I can give you for being sensitive or using disability sensitive communication. Always use person first language, which is referring to the person first and their disability second. So, an example would be I am working with a person with aphasia, as opposed to the saying of I'm working with that aphasic person. Okay? Another thing to consider is you want to make sure not to state that the person has suffered from or is a victim of their disability. Okay? So instead of the client suffered from a stroke, You can just say that the client experienced a stroke, okay? So being careful about how things are worded and being sensitive about that. You also want to stay away from words such as normal for those without disabilities. It implies that others are not normal or that they are not normal. So, language such as typically developing has been used to describe individuals without disabilities. I'll give you an example. When explaining differences in Johnny's communication, one may say that by the age of 5, most typically developing children are able to produce the final consonants in words, but Johnny requires intervention to teach him how to do so. That sounds a little bit different than when explaining the differences in Johnny's communication. One may say that by the age of 5, most normal kids or most normal children are able to produce those final consonants in words, but Johnny cannot. Okay? So again, we're not focused on his status of normal versus abnormal, but instead we are focusing on developing. So typically developing versus not. Okay? You also want to know appropriate terminology for specific terms of disability. So for example, in 2010, um, President Obama signed legislation requiring the federal government to replace the term mental retardation with intellectual disability in many areas of government. Okay? Therefore, we do not use the term mental retardation anymore. We use intellectual disability now. Another one is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders 5, version 5. That is the DSM 5. This one has removed the diagnosis of Asperger's as a way to diagnose higher functioning individuals with autism. Okay, so as of now, we no longer use the term Asperger's. Okay, we just say that someone is on autism spectrum disorder, or depending on their disability, they may fall under a social communication disorder. But we no longer use the term Asperger. So you want to keep up on that disability sensitive in communication. Okay? Oh, sorry about that, guys. So, um, let's talk about when you are actually communicating with an individual with disabilities. I saw an anonymous quote online that said, "Your words, attitude, and actions impact me more than my disability." Think about how impactful that statement is. Your words, attitudes, and actions impact me more than my disability. Hmm. What does that make you think about? So, some general guidelines provided by the North Dakota Center for Persons with Disabilities to go by when communicating with individuals with disabilities. You want to speak directly to the person. Offer to shake their hand. If a person is visually impaired, always introduce yourself. Treat adults as adults. Listen attentively and patiently when someone has a difficult time speaking. Do not cut them off. Do not lean against or hang on to their wheelchairs. Do not pet their service dogs without permission. Basically, treat them as a person as you would anyone else. So again, let's go back to that quote. Your words, attitude, and actions impact me more than my disability. Perhaps something you can talk about in the discussion or not, but definitely something I want you to think about. How we communicate with individuals with disabilities. probably is much more impactful than their disability. Okay, so let's move on. We've discussed communication. Now we're going to talk about another piece of professional conduct, and that is self assessment. Now, we work with people that are multifaceted and ever changing. So, no matter how long you will be in this career, there will always be something new to learn, something more challenging will occur, and a curveball will definitely be thrown your way. In the last 13 years that I've been working in this profession, I'm still learning something new. So, let's think about treatment particularly. You will see that no two clients react the same way to treatment at all. Doesn't matter what type of diagnosis they have, doesn't matter if they are the same age, doesn't even matter if they're brothers and sisters, okay? You will definitely need to modify your presentation of treatment strategies to fit each client and his or her needs because again, they will not react the same way. One way to do this is by reflecting upon your interaction during treatments to determine what is working and what is not working. In order to self reflect, one must do a self assessment on what he or she is doing and how it is affecting the client. You want to ask yourself, is what you're doing working? So, in the survival guide for the beginning speech language clinician, the author defines self assessment as the process of evaluating your own skills and abilities, and then, even more importantly, seeking avenues for improvement. So, again, um, self assessment and self improvement fall under ASHA's Code of Ethics Principle 1, which was discussed in greater detail in the last lecture. As an SLPA, you want to consider your performance in all areas within your scope of practice, which includes clinical experience, verbal communication, interpersonal skills, written communication, and conflict resolution. Let's talk about critical thinking. While you will often receive feedback from your supervisor, it's extremely important that you have the ability to think critically on all aspects of your skills independently, those that involve client interaction and those that do not. So if you look at the slide, we have words like reasoning, evaluating, problem solving, decision making, analyzing. We need to self reflect. We need to critically think. Self reflection will reveal areas that need improvement, which will then give you direction on how to improve. So during self assessment, there are 4 factors to consider. You want to focus on your own personal skill set. Be honest with yourself. Use videos or audio recording if allowed, and observe what you are doing. Are you using your time wisely? Are you communicating effectively? Are you providing appropriate feedback to your clients? If you aren't allowed to record yourself, take notes on what occurred. What do you think went well? Did something frustrate you? Did something make you feel uncomfortable? Was there a moment that you took an action that you weren't certain about? Do you need to ask your supervisors any questions? Or perhaps on the flip side, did something go really well? Did something make you feel really proud? If so, what was it? And what were the factors that went into that? Keep a reflection journal. What were your successes? What were your difficulties? Okay? You want to develop goals for your improvement. What can you do to help the situation? For example, if you notice in your reflections that you are having a difficult time with behavior management, can you make a goal to use a reinforcement schedule to get the client through his session more effectively? Or if you notice that you don't have as much knowledge with Down syndrome and you feel less competent when providing therapy to that population, then can you make a goal for yourself that you will research that disorder and its impacts on communication? During moments of self-assessment, it's important to keep an open mind. Don't be afraid to ask questions and be open to both positive and corrective feedback. Remember, if a mistake was made, be honest with yourself about it and then figure out the next step to correct the mistake. A mistake does not mean a failure. A mistake means there's something more to learn. Applying the concepts of self-assessment and self-improvement to your communication style and interaction with others and your documentation will allow you to grow and become an even more valued employee. Okay, let's see. Let's move on to the next slide. Oh no. The next slide that I'm going to talk about is conflict resolution. Okay. Now, you will work with a variety of professionals, clients, and families or caregivers. A difference in opinion is inevitable. There will always be someone somewhere that do not agree with what you are thinking, what you have said, or what you have done. And when this happens, conflicts may arise. Sometimes this may happen the very first time there is a disagreement, or it may occur over a variety of instances, which may lead to a buildup of conflict. This field will require constant interaction with your clients and your supervisors at the very least. And although interaction with others, such as other SLPAs or other SLPs, clerical staffs, or other professionals, so although interaction with those others may happen very often too, depending on your specific site, it is imperative to understand that your professional conduct and your interpersonal skills are extremely important. So, let's discuss this a little bit more. Whenever there is a disagreement presented, positive conflict resolution is vital. When resolving a conflict, always be mindful and be respectful. Choose your words wisely and consider the message of your nonverbal communication. Communicate with the individual that you are having a conflict with, but first, reflect upon the conflict to determine if there is truly a conflict or was there some type of misinterpretation on your behalf. Sometimes you may think there is a problem where there may not be one. So that's why that reflection is necessary. You also want to consider how important is the conflict to you. You have to pick your battles, okay? You want to think strategically on how it should be handled so the outcome will positively impact all parties involved. If you are, let's say you've gotten into some conflict and you are dead set on winning whatever this disagreement was, probably won't positively impact all of the parties involved. There may need to be some compromise required. You want to take responsibility for your part in the conflict, if if that applies. And you want to be willing to be a part of the process to find a solution. Okay? Be professional and stay away from language. Uh-oh. Sorry guys. Okay. Uh-oh. This is giving me all kind of issues tonight. Sorry about that. So, be professional and stay away from language that is aggressive or accusatory that will place others on defense. And always understand your role as a team member. You're thinking in terms of us, not an individual or me within the professional setting. So, again, let me say that again. Understand your role as a team member and not an individual. An us mentality, not a me mentality when you're in that professional setting. Okay? Let's talk about interpersonal skills. Interpersonal skills are the skills used by a person to interact with others properly. In the business domain, the term generally refers to an employee's ability to get along with others while getting the job done. Interpersonal skills include everything from communication and listening skills to attitude and deportment. Good interpersonal skills are a prerequisite for many positions in an organization. Something for you to think of when dealing with conflict resolution are those interpersonal skills. So let's talk about um, guiding principles to resolving conflict. We're almost done here. You guys have been great dealing with all of the glitches that have been presented. So we just have a couple of more thoughts and we're done. So let's talk about guiding principles to resolving conflict. You want to be an active listener and you want to have good communication skills. Communicate openly, clearly, and directly about the conflict respectfully. You want to also seek resolutions with positive outcomes. So, in other words, let go of the need to be right. Look for positive outcomes for all parties involved. Okay? Finally, you want to be sensitive to others' feelings and don't hold grudges. So, in other words, don't make conflicts personal. Separate facts from feelings and opinions and don't place blame. One of my sayings personally is when you're thinking about emotions and logic, emotions have no place at work. They belong at home. Logical thought is what you need to have at work. Okay? That way you won't personalize everything. And if you're in the wrong, be willing to admit it and be willing to move forward to correct it. Okay? So we are moving on to our final thoughts. And I want you to think about this. The beauty of your career as an SLP is that everything that you do directly impacts another person. Your clients are patients, their family, your supervisors, your colleagues, your families. A decision made by you can and will cause some type of shift in these people's lives. As discussed in the previous lecture, having morals, being ethical, and following laws will be your compass as you take this journey as an SLPA. And while you are on that journey, don't ever forget how important your professional conduct is. The world of speech language pathology is not very large, especially when you are working in the same area. As you work with different supervisors and go to different work sites, ask yourself, what type of professional reputation do you want to have? Do you want to be seen as a team player, a hard worker that takes initiative, or a good communicator? Everywhere you work as an SLPA, especially if you're working in the same geographic region, it is not uncommon for someone to know someone else from a previous work experience. Because you never know where you will apply or who you will end up working with. The best way to market yourself as a dependable and successful SLPA is by establishing it and maintaining a positive professional reputation based upon the qualities discussed in this lecture and the previous lecture. Okay, so we're all done. Here are some of the references, or actually all of the references that was used for this lecture. Don't forget to take your quiz, and don't forget to make a post. You may post a question or comment about the lecture that you may have. Okay, and you may also make comments on your cohort mates post as well. Have a good evening or have a good day, depending on the time that you're listening to this.